Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host. And before we get started, I just got to send a quick shout out to my boys at Iowa State. It is rivalry week here in the state of Iowa against the Iowa Hawkeyes. So go Cyclones, and on with the show.
All right. So we are going to be talking about Entra Suite today. And before we get started, our normal disclaimer, Adam and I both work for Microsoft. This is a Microsoft solution, a product, and it is something that both of us are familiar with, that we sell in the field as field sellers. But the show is not endorsed by Microsoft. We do this on our own time, and this is just to bring awareness for
and
those
out of our own pocket.
And out of our own pocket. So this show today is really just to bring some awareness on some of the new things that are coming out for Microsoft. So that being said, Entra Suite is now generally available. It had been in private and public preview for a while and is now available. It's a new package that includes a bunch of different things. You know how much Microsoft likes to package things together, like our E3 suite and E5. And so Entra Suite is a bunch of Entra products and solutions that are packaged together, including Entra Private Access, Entra Internet Access, Entra ID Governance, Entra ID Protection, and Entra Verified ID. And some of these you're like, maybe nodding, and then all of a sudden I'm naming some of these off and you're like, oh, what is that? And what does that include? So we're going to do like a quick overview of each one of these and to give you an idea of what the capabilities are and pricing and so on and so forth. So starting off with Entra Private Access. We've talked about Entra Private Access and Internet Access before. They were fairly new. They're also generally available now. Private Access is part of that security, a secure edge solution, or SSE, and it's a identity-centric, zero-trust network access that gives you access to your private applications, resources, and it can replace any type of legacy VPN. So this is the newer type of VPN. It's not really, I wouldn't even call it a VPN per se, but it's a way to access your applications without having to provide a full tunnel, VPN tunnel, to your network, because it stitches and uses app proxy connector to stitch together a single connection from your endpoint to your application. It essentially adds on to what we've already had for many, many years, that app proxy that was included that some people used, but it was only for web apps. And now Entra Private Access gives you that capability to do not only just web apps, but also just fully qualified domain names like FQDNs or IP addresses to your resources on any port. Before it used to just pretty much be port 80 and 443. And you can scope it very granularly. Like you can scope down conditional access for a specific app, for a specific connection to a subset of users, even to a specific time frame. If you only want, let's say it's overseas and during their work hours, it's a specific app just for them. You can have just access for a specific time frame. But very good. One of the things that I will mention, even though it's included in Entra Suite, you can use Entra Private Access to use conditional access and multi-factor to on-prem resources if you're on-prem without any additional cost. That's included with your current Microsoft licensing. It's when you're starting to use remote services, if you have a remote user, and then they have to remote into an on-prem or private application service, that's when licensing is required, and that's what is included with Entra Suite. So you do get that remote capability.
We're big fans on this show of Entra App Proxy. We have promoted it for many years, all the way back when it was Azure AD App Proxy. Great technology. We love getting rid of VPNs on the Blue Security Podcast. The idea of having a bunch of clients all sit on the same network and talking to each other is frankly crazy. In 2024, we don't want to see it. We love the micro-segmentation, the micro VPN, the just-in-time access to just the application I'm accessing, and no more and no less. This is a great direction to head toward. Microsoft has one solution. There are competitive solutions that are quite good too. It's a win for security that this is a competitive space. Definitely something you should check out. Definitely should have an item on your roadmap to sunset your monolithic VPN and move to this kind of model as much as possible. And in full transparency, Microsoft internally has felt like we've stepped backwards a little bit on this. We're using our full stack VPN more than I would like, and would love to see us eat our own dog food more. So this is definitely an opportunity. I think all organizations, a goal, and I'd love to see you achieve this in maybe 2 years, is you are fully on board with a zero trust network architecture of some kind, and you are no longer just spinning up an auto VPN every day to access all your internal apps. You've got them segmented, you've got them hid behind a tool like this, which gives you a lot more granular control. Instead of just dumping a client on the network and they can hit everything, you have different policy depending on the sensitivity of the application. This has more stringent access controls than that application does. That makes a ton of sense too. So great technology, very, very cool stuff. And Andy, love the shout out that if you're on-prem to on-prem and you want to start to protect those tools with multi-factor authentication, modern types of authentication, and you're not requiring any external access to it, then you can actually use this with probably your existing licensing today. I believe that's included with M365 E3 and up. So definitely something to check out as some homework, dear listener and viewer.
All right. So Internet Access is the brother sister of Entra Private Access as part of that secure edge solution. And Internet Access is a secure web gateway for your SaaS apps and your internet traffic. And it protects against malicious internet traffic, unsafe or non-compliant content, and any other threats that might appear from the open internet. It provides you granular access control for web categories and for any FQDNs. So web filtering is kind of the key capability here. And it also integrates with conditional access to provide you with that network-based conditional access. So a lot of organizations, when they started to do quote unquote conditional access, it was, you must be on our corporate network. You must egress from a corporate IP in order to access this application. That is a form of conditional access, right? You must be on our corp net as a condition in order to access this thing. And of course, that when we start to talk about zero trust and zero trust architecture, when you require something from your corporate network, which is something that can be compromised pretty easily, then you're not really zero trust because you're putting trust in your corporate network. And that's really something that can be easily compromised. This allows you to say, you must be on Microsoft's Internet Access proxy and egressing from one of our secure proxy locations in order to access your applications. So that allows you to say, bring network-based conditional access to a trusted, obviously you're offloading that trust of your own network onto Microsoft's network, which, whereas a service provider, we're going to secure that with as much as we can. So one of the other things that I want to mention that I learned from the documentation is Adam mentioned that there are a lot of partners and other competitors in this space. You can actually use Internet Access and Private Access with a list of partners. We have a bunch of the common ones that we've worked with: Cisco, Palo Alto Networks, Zscaler, and Netscope. And there's documentation on how to configure Entra Internet Access and Entra Private Access with these partners. And you might ask, well, if I already have them, why would I want to use EIA and EPA? And that's a really good question. The answer is, which is funny because I was asking the same thing as I'm reading through this document. I'm like,
why would you do this?
If I have one, why would I need both? And the answer is when you configure an SSE solution like Zscaler, like Netscope, they're basically proxies. And documentation, best practices, and they will tell you this when you go through it. In Zscaler, because I've deployed it so many times, I even know there's a one-click configuration that bypasses M365 services, because best practice is you don't want to hairpin or proxy your Microsoft traffic. You can proxy everything else, but you want to exclude your Microsoft traffic. And we obviously have all these FQDNs and IPs IP addresses published. But what Zscaler does, and probably some of these other providers will do, is they'll dynamically update it. They'll scan for you, then dynamically update it. And for Zscaler, it was a one-click configuration. Just bypass all the things of Microsoft, so they go direct to Microsoft versus to Zscaler's proxy or Netscope's proxy or whatever. But if you use it in conjunction with Entra Internet Access and Entra Private Access, you can proxy your internet traffic for Microsoft through our services, which obviously are optimized for Microsoft. In fact, when Entra Internet Access first came out, it was only for Microsoft traffic. So that provides you with still that ability to say conditional access for network-based, security. You must be on Entra Internet Access in order to access SharePoint, in order to access your OneDrive for Business, in order to access Teams, so on and so forth. And so you have that still, have that security for conditional access for Microsoft stuff. And then, you have your Zscaler, your Netscope or whatever for your other stuff. So still a good way to take advantage and not have to bypass, all security for your Microsoft stuff. You can still use it in conjunction with your third-party partners.
Let's talk about the last thing you just mentioned first, that EIA and EPA for partners, and why that Microsoft guidance exists. So Andy referenced that best practice is not to proxy or really touch in any way traffic headed to Microsoft 365 and Microsoft services. Well, why is that? The number one reason is because Microsoft has one of the largest private fiber networks in the world and has a massive amount of points of presence. And so the way we route Microsoft 365 traffic is to get it on our network as fast as possible and then use our private fiber to get to the data center where your data at rest is actually stored. So for example, let's say your Exchange Online data is in a data center here in Des Moines, Iowa, where we have soon to be 7 Microsoft data center campuses. And let's say you're traveling and you're in Western Europe, you're in Germany, let's say. If you are proxying your traffic, you would go over the public internet back to your company's data center. Let's say you're based in the Eastern United States, Washington, D.C., get in your data center. Then you would egress out, hit Microsoft's point of presence, and then only navigate the Microsoft private fiber network between DC and Des Moines. If you're doing it correctly and not hairpinning that traffic, you're going to get on the on-ramp in Western Europe, let's say again in Germany, and then you're going to ride the Microsoft private fiber network, which is less congested, faster, just better in every way, and access your Exchange Online information. You're going to have a better user experience. Now think of that with latency sensitive applications like Microsoft Teams video calls, screen sharing, that sort of thing. You're going to have a way better user experience than that data going across the Atlantic Ocean on public connectivity instead of private fiber. So that's why that guidance exists. This is a great option to stick with your current provider, but get the benefits of that network-based conditional access, that additional point of assurance. Now let's unpack that too, because Andy was talking about how generally we have a pretty dim view of using network-based conditional access here on the Blue Security Podcast. If you have a conditional access policy that says if you're egressing from an IP address we own, don't do MFA, just let you in the front door. That is a very different model than using that as one of many signals of trust or not trust as we're making an access decision. I am all for requiring a network-based control to say, where are you coming from? Are you using the connectivity we demand to access a thing, along with a whole bunch of other signals? Are you doing strong authentication? What's your ID protection status? Are you low, medium, or high? What's the status of your endpoint? Is it properly managed? What's the status of your EDR solution? Is it at risk right now? And when we bring all those risk factors together, you're on a managed endpoint, it's healthy. Your EDR is reporting no risk. Your identity has not flagged any identity risk. You're on the network we demand to access it. Now we have layered in 4 different signals before we've made an access decision. That's a good thing. And we are very much in favor of that. What we are not in favor of is like single factor authentication, single signal conditional access, where we take one signal. Oh, you're on a good IP. Fine. No MFA for you. and just come on in, single factor. Like, we hate that. So I want to clarify, it's okay to do network-based control, whether that's your own private network or whether you're using Entra Internet Access, but make sure you're using that as one of many signals and you're not using it to relax the security requirements. You're making it a requirement towards access, not as an excuse to demand less security. That's a big, big difference in what we're talking about. So I wanted to clarify that point too. That's where this makes a ton of sense and does add an added layer of confidence that this is a good login. When somebody's coming to your M365 environment and trying to read their email or download a SharePoint file or whatever.
Great call out there, Adam. So the next thing that I want to do an overview of is Entra ID Governance. And so again, this is included with Entra Suite, and it is the full Entra ID Governance package that you could actually just purchase on its own. Same thing with Entra Internet Access. You can just buy that on its own, as well as Entra Private Access. So Entra ID Governance, there are some capabilities that are included with Entra P1, and then some more capabilities that are included with Entra P2, and then there's the full suite. The whole suite is made up of 3 different major areas. First one's called entitlement management, which allows you to manage IDs and access different applications or workflows or assignments, and then allows you to expire them. So one use case for this is like when you assign a SharePoint or a Teams or even just a file to any type of M365 group. Users can request access to these things, and then you can expire them on different time frames. You can also use it with different roles if you wanted to. So if I've used entitlement management for assigning an Azure role to an M365 group and then requesting access to that group. And then you can have as many gates as you want when you request access. Again, you can do it expired by time frame. You can allow like a manager or a team member to review that access before granting it, so on and so forth. It also includes access reviews. And so this is like the next part where you're allowing admins or other group managers to efficiently manage any type of group membership or access to enterprise applications or roles. And you can have these pop up automatically, schedule access reviews for certain groups. So one example for this that's built in is review all guests. So if you want to have a tighter, vision and overview of what guests have access, if you have guests accessing sensitive documents, you can have a access review of a specific site, a specific SharePoint. And then you can just take a look and say, okay, these are the same people from last month, or all of a sudden there's a new one on there. And you're like, well, how did that person get on there, right? And so this is all built in to the Entra ID governance. And then the final one is
hold on. Before you move on real quick, I want to make one point in the moment. So if you're listening and you're really familiar with what's included in Entra ID P2, you may have just said, wait a minute, Andy, I have entitlement management. I have access reviews. So just a point of clarity here. We did not take anything out of Entra ID P2. The capabilities that you have had with it in entitlement management and access reviews are still there. What we've done with Entra ID governance is built more capabilities in both of those areas, more granular controls, more options to configure them. So you keep what you have. We took nothing away. We just added more and then decided, hey, this was a lot of engineering effort. We need an ROI on this too. Let's bundle this and make this a product. And then what Andy's about to get to, workflows, is an all new thing that's only in Entra ID governance. But those last 2 things, if they sound familiar, that's because they are, but there's a lot of cool stuff only in Entra ID governance. So be sure to check that out. And back to lifecycle.
Yeah. And what I'll do is I'll post a link to our licensing fundamentals for this, which has a nice graphical chart.
Great chart.
That shows you what's included in P1, what's included in P2, what's included in Entra ID governance. And so as part of Entra ID governance too, what I wanted to mention is that it includes privileged identity management. So it includes PIM for groups, it includes PIM. And so that's also something you might be familiar with on the P2 aspect. So we were talking about it before the show. And essentially, if you're like an E3 customer and you want Entra Suite, some of these capabilities, you can buy Entra Suite on its own, and you essentially get all of the Entra P2 goodness that's included with Entra P2. So for lifecycle workflows, again, this is part of that Entra ID governance. It is a feature that allows you to automate lifecycle processes. So like when someone joins the organization and they need access to things, different applications, different roles, you can automate that. It can integrate with HR systems and build a process. You can also have a lifecycle workflow when someone moves within the organization from one organization to another. They might need more access, they might need access removed, and so you can build a lifecycle workflow to review that access and automate. If I'm moving from IT to security, if I'm moving from security to something else. So, and then of course, when someone leaves the organization, you can automate that and take away the access that's not needed anymore, or anything else that comes up. So that is lifecycle workflows. And then of course, again, it integrates with different HR systems that can trigger off of these.
One note here, and I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but I know is a thing. The lifecycle workflows and the broader Entra ID governance solution do have some support for plugins that were previously used with Microsoft Identity Manager. So if you are a MIM customer, MIM support has been extended, I think, till the end of the decade. So you still have time, but if you're looking for what's the next solution, what's the migration path forward for Microsoft customers who've been on MIM for a very long time, this is it. There is some backward compatibility with some of those plugins and stuff. I'm not super clear on the details, so definitely a question for your Microsoft team. However, just want to make the plug. If you're a MIM customer and you're trying to figure out what's next, this is what's next, and certainly worth having that conversation to see if it's the right fit for you.
All right, moving on to Entra ID Protection. So this is the advanced identity solution that we have for Entra. It's built into P2. If you're a P2 customer, Entra P2 customer, you've had identity protection, and of course it's going to be included with the Entra Suite as well. So a lot of different things that come with ID protection. It'll detect multiple risks that we have a whole document that'll tell you, but just as an example, anonymous IP usage, like Tor, password spray attacks, leaked credentials. And so it'll detect these risks when your users are authenticating from different places or different IDs and passwords. And so it'll detect that. And then of course you can investigate it. Any one of these risks that pop up will have a detection alert. You can also have a report for risky sign-ins and a report for risky users that you can review and take remediation on. You can automate those remediation actions by using risk-based conditional access, which is, again, it's a feature that is part of P2, but included in Entra ID Protection. Risk-based conditional access, like if I'm signing in from a risky user, or if I have a risky sign-in, automatically it'll put that user in high risk, and you can have some sort of action like next time the user logs in, reset their password. And that's all done automated without any type of admin intervention. Now, when it comes to pricing for all this, I will kick it over to Adam as the pricing guru. But, we talked about how some of the stuff is included with, P1, P2. It's included in E5. So if you're an E5 customer, you get price breaks on this stuff. So there is a general price for the whole suite. Each one of these can be purchased separately. And then there's price breaks, based on what you already.
Yeah. So the minimum bar to enter, you do need to be an Entra ID P1 customer. The way most customers own that is at the Microsoft 365 E3 level. If you're there, you can buy ID governance. The thing about Entra Suite. Entra Suite. You can buy Entra Suite. And Entra Suite includes everything that's in Entra ID P2. Here's the rub. If you are an M365 customer or Entra ID P2 customer, then the cost is less because we're not going to make you pay for those components twice. That's the philosophy here, is nobody's getting double charged for anything. We're going to get the right price for you to get you all the capabilities that are new to you while you're not paying for things you already have. So it works out. Andy and I took a look at the street pricing on this. It looks like it's about $12 per user per month. If you are a Entra ID P1 or E3 customer, and it's about $9 per user per month if you are an Entra ID P2 or E5 customer. Now, those prices can vary depending on your volume licensing level, so talk to your Microsoft account team for more details. But that gives you at least budgetary pricing on what to expect for this suite. And Andy and I looked at the component pricing for a lot of these solutions. And the long story short, without talking pricing too much, is that if there's about 2 components here that sound like they make sense and are valuable to you, you will save money by buying the suite, and you'll get everything else included essentially versus buying everything a la carte. So there's a lot of value in here, way cheaper than buying these as individual components. Now you can do that if you're just like, I just want this one thing, knock yourself out. But if 2 or if 3 makes sense, this is no brainer territory. You will save a ton of money. And if you want all 5, man, it's a great value. So a lot of cool stuff in here. We do love our bundles. So talk to your Microsoft account team for more details. And I think we still have one more component to go.
One more component, yes. Entra Verified ID. And I wanted to spend just a little bit of time. I'd love to do a deep dive on this one at some point, but I'll give you the 100 level overview today. So Verified ID is a managed verifiable credential service that's based on an open standard. It also enables real-time identity verification. Verified ID, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, is included with Entra P1, essentially.
Correct, yes.
So if you're an Entra customer, Entra P1 customer, you actually get Verified ID as a feature so you can start issuing out verifiable credentials. What's included in Entra Suite is a premium feature, which is a face check. So this one of many premium features that may pop up, but the first one is starting with face check, and we'll talk about that. But Entra ID in general is based on an open standard. It's based on these decentralized identifiers. Microsoft is actively collaborating with the Decentralized Identity Foundation, the W3C credentials community, and also the wider identity community in general. It can be, in general, user-generated, self-owned, globally unique identifiers that are rooted in a decentralized trust system. So each organization is essentially your own decentralized trust system, or you can also have partners. Microsoft has a whole ecosystem of partners that you can use as a trust system. And so if you're using your own Microsoft verifiable credential solution, it uses the decentralized IDs and they're cryptographically signed as proof that the verifier is attesting to the information provided that they are the owners of the verifiable credentials. So each one of the credentials that you verify and issue out with your organization are cryptographically signed, either using a shared key or bringing your own key. Now, all of this sounds pretty complicated, and you're probably asking, like, why would I use this? What Microsoft is essentially trying to do is to use this open standard to build a better way of using a digital ID, an ID that you can use anywhere. Eventually, this open standard, hopefully, when it becomes more popular, will be integrated with all sorts of different organizations that you can essentially bring your verifiable ID to and say, hey, I've already been verified, let me in. So a good example of this, we do this all the time. And I was trying to figure out a way of how to explain this because it was explained to me and now I understand it a lot better. So we use verified IDs all the time in our life, everyday life. We use a driver's license, we use a passport. When you go, those are verifiable IDs that have been issued by a trust, the government, and they say that this is the person that you say you are. And so you can show that ID anywhere, and it is used as a common form that is trusted. And so we're trying to build a digital form of that. And so verifiable IDs, we do have some customers of government nations that are using Microsoft standard to issue out a digital ID that can be used. If you go to the bank and they need to verify that you are who you say you are, without having to provide a physical ID, you can provide a verified digital ID. And there are also already examples of this, not based on an open standard, but essentially based on a service. So one example that I use is actually ID.me. So if you're a military veteran or an active duty military, or anyone who's worked in the government, you may be familiar with ID.me because it is a government, it started with government, it's military as well. So a lot of times when I go to a website that has this connection to ID.me, they probably have an API that you can pull in to build with the website. And they want to say, oh, if you're a veteran or an active duty military, you get a 20% discount. How do you verify that you are military? Like if I'm going to Under Armour and they say veterans get 20%, like how does Under Armour verify that I've been in the military? They don't, right? So they have built this connector to ID.me, which I have trusted that, I have uploaded my government ID, my photo, my DD-214, which is my proof of service, which has my social security number on it, like it's actual documents, and I'm uploading to this site, and then they look over it. They say, oh, yep, this looks good. You are verified as a veteran. You're verified as active duty, so on and so forth. And then as long as they verified it, they send the signal back to Under Armour, and Under Armour says, cool, here's your 20% discount, right? And so that's essentially a real world usage of what this could be. But what you can do is take advantage of some of the features now. So you can use your verified credentials. You can, as an organization, again, included with Entra ID P1, you can use verified ID to access sensitive applications. You can require a verified ID as a condition for conditional access to access certain things. And so it's not that difficult to issue out verified ID. Again, you have to have a verified domain. You have to upload your DID documents to a specific site to confirm and register your decentralized ID. But as long as you're a global admin and you have access to your domain, collaborate with the folks who have the right roles. Looking through the documentation, I was walking through it this morning. It doesn't take that much time. And then you can start issuing out verified IDs for different purposes. Now, what Entra Suite includes is this face check. And so face check is a privacy respecting facial matching feature that you can then take verified ID even farther and say, I want to do a real-time face check of that person who's trying to access this thing that requires a verified ID. And so we use Azure AI services on the back end to compare a verified ID with a photo to a real-time photo that is taken from your phone, and comparing those two photos to say, is this person at all, right? And the AI will return a result. None of the photos are stored. It's just done for comparison. And then only the results are shared. None of the other identity data is shared. And so you're able to compare a verifiable ID with photo with a real person sitting here to take that step even further on making sure that you are who you say.
And face check is normally a consumptive service, so you pay as you use it. And what was it, Andy, a quarter per face check, something like that? Yeah. And so what do you get in Entra Suite, which is a fixed cost per month per user? You get 8 face checks per user per month, which is a $2 value effectively. And so if you need more than that, then you would pay the consumptive rate after that. But that's all included in the service, and essentially more value included in it. Very cool stuff here. One of the points I want to make, especially in the identity space, sometimes there's this perception that Microsoft loves to build proprietary systems. I will say my first job at Microsoft, when I got hired, I was an identity seller. Selling Azure Active Directory was my very first job at Microsoft. Throughout the entire history of working with our identity folks, the one thing they've been incredibly dedicated to is working with industry's standards bodies, industry consortiums, and developing open standards and leveraging open standards. So you look at Microsoft's champion of OpenID Connect, FIDO2 security keys, these decentralized IDs. It's something we take very seriously in that the best identity solutions are the identity solutions that are accepted around the world in every organization, in every country, and every person can use them. And so that's a real goal here. And so this verified ID stuff may seem kind of highfalutin, pie in the sky, someday dreams of the unique decentralized ID I can take anywhere and present anywhere. But this is how it starts. And it starts by building consensus and starts by working and reaching across industries, across organizations, and building something that's for the common good. So I think this is really one of the more interesting things we're doing. And I'd encourage all our listeners and viewers, if you're a technologist and you're curious in technology, this is a space to watch, because I think there's more cool stuff to come here for sure. But this is a way you could use this today. And Andy, we were talking in the pre-show before we got started of what's in a real world use case, especially one our listeners and viewers may be interested in. The one use case I've seen presented that you would all be very interested in is using face check for help desk verification. Someone calls in, hey, I need my password reset. We say, hey, great. Here's a link I'm going to send you in a text message or a QR code that's going to be up on your screen. Scan that code and take a live selfie from a couple different angles or however it works. We're going to compare that and make sure you are who you say you are before we reset your password. Cool. And that's a fantastic use case for this sort of thing that you could get with this Entra Suite and stand up very quickly and really enhance the security of your help desk, because we've seen from recent security incidents, MGM Resorts, that having a strong and secure help desk is a critical link in your overall security posture. If your help desk security posture is weak, it helps attackers do very simple social engineering attacks to get in the door, especially with the rise of things like AI-generated voices and AI-generated deepfakes and those sorts of things. Just being like, oh yeah, you sound like you. Let's go ahead and do that. Might not be enough proof. So doing something like this that uses a live photo to validate your identity is a great next step. We're never going to have a 100% solution, but seems like a reasonable step forward in securing your service desk, which helps definitely secure your overall security posture.
Yeah, and there's actual documentation on this verified help desk workflow in our documentation, our learn.microsoft.com. So you can add it using an ARM template, an Azure Resource Management. So you can just deploy the ARM template to Azure and add it as a dedicated web application. Or you can add like an API webhook as well to like any service desk tool that you have currently. So it's not that difficult to integrate into your process, but you do have to obviously set up verified ID beforehand, which takes a little bit of time, as well as issuing out those credentials to your employees before you can take advantage of this. And other things I was talking about, the discount thing is very common, right? So if you are a member of one organization that might offer a discount to members of another organization. If I need a discount for shopping or at some service, to verify that you're an employee of that organization. So for example, if Adam is part of
Iowa State
alumni, right? And I give, I'm a shop owner and I say, I give discounts to Iowa State alumni. Like, how would I verify that digitally? Like if I have a website, right? And so you can, use Adam would have to have a credential that was issued that was verified by Iowa State. But if that was a thing, it can use the open standard integrated into my website to verify that credential through Microsoft. So essentially it's an Entra feature. So it's there's a lot of different ways to utilize this, but I think there are ways that organizations can take advantage of that now. All right. So that was our overview of Entra Suite. Hopefully you learned something. There's something that you can take advantage of. If you're interested in any of this as far as testing it out or doing a trial, just contact your Microsoft rep and they can get you started on it. That's our show for this week. Thanks for listening and watching. As always, our contact information will be in the show notes, as well as all the links to the stuff that we talked about today. Thanks, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJBrewer. See you at our next episode.